Yes! Oh man, this is probably one of my least favorite topics. Eververse. Yep, some hate it, some like it, but I don't think that anybody loves it. I'm pretty sure I said that exact same statement word for word in a previous video, but anyways, I'm not gonna make this video talking entirely about Eververse. I want to talk to you about Bright Dust gains and how to get into the consistent groove of keeping your Bright Dust quantity high. So, without further ado, let's get it in. Now, I'm pretty sure that everybody is aware of how scarce Bright Dust sources in Destiny 2 are. Seasons 1 through 6 will grant you Bright Dust simply by dismantling Eververse vanity items, and Tess Everest used to have bounties of her own that would grant you Bright Dust. Now, if you were a frequent player, it was easy to get Bright Dust, and at one point in time, I actually had well over 60,000 Bright Dust before Season of Opulence. However, the changes, the Eververse Bright Dust acquisition, and Solstice of Hero armor glows murdered my Bright Dust bank account. Yeah, I dropped down to about 20,000 Bright Dust halfway through Shadowkeep, and I didn't want to buy silver, so I had to figure out a way to regain all of that lost Bright Dust. Now, as of presently, the only way to adequately get Bright Dust is to play all three sides of the game. That's PvP, PvE, and Gambit. And to be honest, this sucks for the casual players and the players that don't play certain parts of the game, especially PvP, because based on a rough history that PvP has been in, I wouldn't blame anybody who says that they want nothing to do with the Crucible. But unfortunately, Shaxx, Zavala, and the Drifter are the only vendors in the game that offer bounties that reward Bright Dust. And when Eva Levante visits the tower for events, her bounties also grant Bright Dust as well. But if you want to maximize your Bright Dust gains every week, you will have to play PvP, Strikes, and Gambit on all three characters. Now, this may sound like a chore, but there's an easy way to do this without overwhelming yourself too much. Every week, I normally start off with my least played character, and I do the 2 weekly strike bounties. Now, you'll have to do 3 strikes to complete both of these bounties, but it doesn't matter which playlist these strikes come from. You can even load in the strikes from the director and get progress towards these bounties. But anyways, I will focus on the other tasks first. For example, if one bounty instructs you to kill 150 Hive and the other one says that you gotta kill 150 Cabal, I would suggest loading into one of the 3 weekly Nightfall strikes and going to a lost sector inhabited by one of those enemy factions. Now, realize that this won't be possible if not a single one of these 3 strikes partakes on a planet that has these enemy factions. If that's the case, you would have to load into a strike themed around that particular enemy faction that you're trying to kill. So if I had to kill 150 Hive and none of the 3 Nightfall strikes had a Hive lost sector, I would run the Strange Terrain strike because it's literally impossible to complete the strike without killing 150 Hive, since that's the only enemies that you fight here. And at that point in time, you might as well complete the strike because it'll count towards the 3 that you have to complete to finish these bounties. If all you have to do is complete 3 strikes, you can speed run the Lake of Shadow strike, which is probably the shortest strike in the game, and bam, that's 400 Bright Dust. For Gambit and Crucible, there's really no shortcut around this, but you can make the experience less painful by going in with a full fire team. Now, if you don't want to go that route, Momentum Control and Mayhem are probably your best bet, but if you'll be partaking in Trials of Osiris and a competitive playlist, these bounties will complete themselves naturally. And giving Rumble a try is something I would suggest if you're a solo player or if you decide to do most of your activities alone. Now, for Gambit, if you have 3 friends and can coordinate who the designated invader will be as well as what weapons will be used for primeval DPS, you're golden. If you're going for the ritual or pinnacle weapons, these bounties will complete themselves naturally and you won't have to necessarily go, you know what, I'm pretty sure I just repeated that, but yeah, it applies the same way for Gambit. But anyways, now that you understand the best way to go about things, let's do some math. As stated previously, Shaxx, Zavala, and the Drifter are the only vendors in the game that offer bounties that reward Bright Dust, and each vendor has 2 weekly bounties each. Each bounty rewards 200 Bright Dust, so if you complete both, you will be 400 Bright Dust richer. Complete all 6 bounties on one character and you'll have an extra 1200 Bright Dust. Do this on all 3 characters and you will be at 3600 in 1 week. If you do this every week for an entire month, you would have gained 14,400 Bright Dust. To be honest, this isn't really that bad, but it'll suck for anybody who absolutely has to have everything from the Eververse, because you'll either have to pay with silver or wait until the item you want is available to be purchased with Bright Dust. The only way to combat that fear of missing out attribute is to really think about purchasing things that might not ever be any use for you. For example, I enjoy the Crimson Hand Cannon and I think that it's a great weapon, but I don't use it enough to justify purchasing an ornament for it. And at the time of this video's recording, the Black Death ornament is available as a Bright Dust purchase, which is great, but obtaining Bright Dust itself is a grind and a half, and I wouldn't feel too great about spending Bright Dust on something that I won't ever get any use out of. Even though I wouldn't be spending any real world money, I still don't think doing this is a good idea because you still put a lot of time into accumulating that Bright Dust. It's just something to think about. Also, don't sleep on the bounties that grant 10 Bright Dust either. You'll come to realize that they can be pretty efficient. Now, you can only pick up 5 of these bounties at a time from each vendor, but they don't have a daily limit. So if you're insane enough to grind these bounties out, have at it. The only catch is that they cost cost 3,000 glimmer each, so you'll eventually have to figure out a way to keep some glimmer. But these bounties serve as a good bright dust replacement method for inexpensive Eververse vanity items. Ghost projections are usually fairly cheap, costing about 200 bright dust, I believe. So if you were up to it, you could make that 200 bright dust back by doing 20 of these bounties. Again, that's if you're up to it. And if you were, I would suggest doing Zavala's bounties because you can load into any of the 3 weekly Nightfall strikes and run around on the planets killing enemies. It isn't even necessary to use the Lost Sector trick that I mentioned earlier, because you can literally load in by yourself and do this without a fire team. In my honest opinion, I believe that Bungie is aware that not every activity in the game is engaging to everybody in the player base. This is why Bright Dust acquisition is confined to playing PvP, Strikes, and Gambit, and I honestly believe that this is a method of giving every game mode some form of relevancy. And with all due seriousness, I understand that it's important to Bungie that everything in the game sees some type of play, but I feel that making Bright Dust accessible via partaking in activities that you wouldn't normally play isn't the best move. Even though there isn't an equal amount of people who play Gambit and PvP compared to PvE/raids, I still believe that we should have the option to play the game as we see fit and still be able to obtain the maximum amount of Bright Dust every week. Also, due to the fact that you need 3 characters to maximize Bright Dust gains, you're missing out on a lot if you only play on 1 character. And to be honest, Destiny is supposed to be a game that encourages you to play however you want, but that ideology is countervailed by the fact that you're missing out on a lot of Bright Dust if you refuse to play on a certain character. I hope that Destiny 2 receives an update that allows us to grind Bright Dust however we want. The maximum can remain at 3,600 per week because I think that's fair, and I don't have a problem with that, but there are times where I'm not in the mood to play Gambit or Strikes if I'm being 100% honest. Alright, that does it for this one, everybody. In the comment section, tell me how much Bright Dust you have, and tell me if you grind Bright Dust every week because I'm curious to know if anybody else besides me does this every week. If you made it to the end of this video and enjoyed what you watched, go ahead and thumb wrestle that like button until it turns blue. And if you're new to my neck of the woods, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you don't ever miss a video of the most elite gaming content. But with that being stated, 1LHD is over and out. Y'all take it easy.